Hey guys, welcome back to another Freaky Fast Friday episode where we give you the scoop on a case in 30 minutes or less. So sit back, make yourself a drink or a cup of tea, and join us for this week's episode. Hey guys, welcome back to the podcast. This week we are talking about a pretty controversial case. So we're talking about Byron David Smith. He was a homeowner in Little Falls, Minnesota, and he brought about a huge discussion of what is covered in the Castle Doctrine when he murdered two teenagers who broke into his home on Thanksgiving Day 2012. Smith was 64 in 2012 and retired from the U.S. State Department. He had always been unmarried. At trial, Smith claimed he had been regularly burglarized, although only one instance was actually reported to the police, or could even be substantiated. There was even evidence of a burglary of Smith's garage that he seemed to know nothing about. Like, they found evidence that somebody had taken stuff out of there, but he clearly didn't know about it. The most recent burglary before the crime was October 27th, and it resulted in around $10,000 of guns, electronics, and other property being stolen. A Remington rifle and a .22 caliber pistol were listed as stolen items. These were similar types of guns to those used to murder Kifer and Brady. Bruce Smith, Byron's brother, has more or less justified the panic that his brother supposedly went through. So his brother is like, oh my God, he was just this old man and he was trying to defend himself. But then the neighbors are like, yeah, he used to shoot his gun in his backyard. And he clearly was very open about having guns, and it seems like he was not afraid of anybody, to be honest. A neighbor even asked the police at one point to do something about the shooting that he was constantly doing, but apparently his house was just on the outside of city limits, so technically he wasn't breaking any city laws. Which is, yeah, anyway. Smith began carrying a gun around his home in a holster and was reportedly stockpiling supplies to hide in his basement. So he was basically carrying a gun around his home when he was there alone. It's interesting.
Which says paranoid to me.
Interesting that he's so paranoid, considering we technically only know of the one burglary, right? And so there hasn't even been...
Yeah, so he only reported one to the police, although he claimed it was happening all the time. So here's the thing. He was almost definitely these two had definitely burglarized him at least once. Was he being burglarized constantly and all the time, and was he in fear for his life? That's kind of what's in question here, you know?
Mm-hmm. And so whether or not he was kind of just going insane almost by basically driving himself insane and being paranoid, or by being paranoid.
Yeah. His biggest argument at trial was that he feared for his life. So the Castle Doctrine, a little bit of background about this, is a law, quote, allows property owners to, while on their property, so they have to be on their own property, take reasonable measures to protect themselves and their property, even if those measures would otherwise be illegal. Depending on the state, murder can be justified in certain situations, while in other states, retreat is supposed to be the first option if one truly fears for their life. Minnesota is interesting because I think it's a fairly gun-friendly state. So,
but it's also pretty...
It's interesting
liberal.
that he got convicted.
So,
is it pretty liberal?
From what I know, at least in the city.
Yeah. On November 22nd, 2012, which was Thanksgiving Day, Haile Kifer, 18, and her cousin Nicholas Brady, 17, were seen on Smith's home surveillance footage casing the home and eventually breaking into the home. So casing is you're kind of walking around making sure nobody's there, or seeing if there's something that got left unlocked, or that kind of thing, casing it. Little did they know Smith had actually parked his car down the street to appear he wasn't home, and he was currently hiding in the basement.
Sounds so premeditated.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what they found in trial, you know?
Good.
Yeah. So that is the smoking gun, kind of, to say, of the
totally.
case. But it's one thing if there was, a horror movie style, someone coming into your house and going into every room and every closet and looking for you, and you were hiding in a closet, and then they come.
That'd be different. Yeah.
That's completely different. That would be a different story for why you could hide and then
when you have a chance to make a move, you can make a move. But different than these two young people were probably, admittedly not going to do good things. They were probably going to steal a bunch of stuff from this guy. That's not the case. He's hiding purposefully so he can ambush them, basically.
So the next several events there is audio and sparse video evidence of, although Smith maintained that he was acting completely in self-defense. So he had actually set up, so he had security cameras all the way around the perimeter of his house. He had a couple security cameras inside of his house, I believe, and then he had set up a camcorder, handheld camcorder in the basement. I'm sure that's what he was trying to get, was some kind of evidence that he was in danger.
But also parking the car down the street is
he was
bait.
He was luring them.
It was
in my personal opinion, and obviously the jury found that as well. He was luring them. And don't get me wrong, I do want to pause and say Nicholas Brady and Haile Kifer, they definitely had bad intentions, right? Were they going there to kill him? No. Were they going there to steal a bunch of his shit? Yeah. Totally.
But does that
mean they deserve to die? I guess it kind of depends on how you view that kind of thing,
Not even just die, that he walked in and was oh gosh, and shot his gun at their leg or something. Not like that.
Yes.
This guy,
because he wasn't surprised by them. Yeah.
No.
He wasn't caught off guard. Yeah. He knew they were coming.
It was he was because of how he had felt leading up to this point, that everyone had been burglarizing him and he was under attack, sort of. It's this was his moment to show everybody that he wasn't messing around,
Yeah, kind
of how I see it, which of course didn't pay off anyway, because the jury found him guilty of murder. So
well, and I'll read you guys a quote of him in trial later, and he definitely thought he was 100% in the right.
Crazy.
He thought that he basically had gotten to the point of, the only word I can think of is delusion, where he thought the only way that he could stop them from burglarizing him would be to kill them. Yeah. So he had gotten to that point, and don't get me wrong, he 100% knew what he was doing, and he 100% knew it was murder. But he still kind of in the end thought it would be justified.
Yeah.
So yeah, the next couple things are, there's video and audio evidence of them. So these are non-negotiables essentially. So as Nicholas Brady descended into the basement in the dark, because Smith had removed all the light bulbs.
Weird.
And he had hidden out of sight for about 12 minutes.
Hold on, wouldn't it have been easier to just take the fuses out? What is up with the light bulbs? That's timely. Or time consuming.
Again.
Well, he purposely didn't want them to switch on the light to the basement and see him, because he was just sitting there. Well, he was hidden behind something. We'll post some pictures on the Instagram of what the room setup looked like, and how you would clearly not be able to see him when you were coming down the stairs.
Oh, gotcha.
So from the time that Nicholas Brady and Haile Kifer had broken into the house, it had been about 12 minutes that he was sitting in the basement. Smith, as Brady walked down the stairs, Smith shot him twice while he was on the stairs, and then he shot him once more in the head after he had fallen down the stairs onto the ground.
And these are teenagers, right?
So Nicholas Brady was 17 and Haile Kifer was 18. So they're pretty young. Not young enough to not know the consequences of their actions.
No, but teenagers.
And so I guess you could argue that Smith didn't see if he was if Brady was carrying a weapon. I guess you could argue that, but to shoot him twice and then also shoot him in the head once he had fallen down the stairs.
And so the issue that arises here is you would need to after he had fallen on the ground, you would want to be to find the line where self-defense ends. You would have to be would a reasonable person see him laying on the ground and think that he could still get up and hurt?
Yeah, exactly.
Byron David Smith. Yeah.
At that point, he's not a
and that's what's in
anymore.
question.
So
that's what's in question.
Very good point. Yeah.
That's what's in question. So after he shot him in the head on the ground, Byron David Smith apparently made some taunting remarks to the body. Obviously, this is on audio.
And he wrapped the body in a tarp and dragged it out of sight of the stairwell, so like off to the side.
Oh God.
So that Haile wouldn't see.
But she probably heard it.
No,
Yeah,
she most definitely, yeah.
But you would have come.
Byron David Smith goes upstairs at one point, presumably to look for Haile Kifer.
To kill her.
Mhm.
And then he returns downstairs after about 15 minutes and hides in the same spot he was in before. So he's like behind this like, I think it's like a bookshelf or a shelf of some kind.
So she was there, but she hadn't gone in yet.
So Kifer, who was not in the home at first but entered a few minutes after Smith's return to the basement, can be heard calling for Nicholas.
Okay.
Like in the audio and video. So like Smith went upstairs, saw that she hadn't entered the home yet, was doing whatever around the house upstairs, probably heard her come in, went back down. And then between the time that he returned to the basement and Haile came into the basement, you can hear on the video her calling for Nicholas. As she came down the stairs, Smith shot her. As she fell to the ground, he is heard saying, "Oh, sorry about that," when his gun jams. So like his gun, the sound of his gun jamming, and then he says, "Oh, sorry about that." Kifer screams, "Oh my God," several times as Smith shoots her in the torso a few times. He then shoots her in the head just to the side of her left eye. He calls her derogatory names as he drags her into the area where Nicholas lays and finally kills her by shooting her under the chin. So the next day, Smith finally reports the death to the police. The county sheriff understood that the teens were definitely there to burglarize the home. So like the county sheriff responded to the, or it was probably a deputy, but the county sheriff like definitely agrees that the teens were there to burglarize the home. Is all I'm gonna say about that.
And I mean, technically he's correct. They were there to we assume that they were there to burglarize the home, but then literally everything else that happens after that is completely Smith's fault. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, so like this is a really controversial case, and as soon as I started reading what it was about, I was like hesitant to do it because it's a little bit political if you think about it, because there's obviously about 50-50 down the middle of people that are like, oh, he was in every right to do this. But I mean, in theory, he could have done the same thing, got as much as he could on video of them walking around his house, and then just submitted that to the police. Yeah.
Okay, but here is my thing. Why? And I get it, like everybody's gun ownership views are different, but like I just like morally, by like regular old human morals, in what world, like it's, you shouldn't be able to kill somebody for like stolen property. That's illegal, at least here.
He like brutally murdered these people too. It wasn't like I said earlier, sort of, it wasn't like he shot them in the leg to like stop them.
He made sure they were dead.
Oh, he murdered them.
He kind of like executed them, if you think about it.
As to make a point, basically, is why he did it. At least that's my opinion. Like he murdered them to make a point that no one was gonna steal from me again, you know, sort of thing.
Well, yeah, and so we're gonna get into like the trial.
Not good.
Yeah. So by the way, Smith's like argument for not calling the police the day it happened was that it was Thanksgiving and it was a holiday.
Okay.
Sure. Yeah, they laid in the house dead for like almost 24 hours.
Ew.
Yeah.
While he was there.
Yeah, it's kind of gross, right? Like, you know, about like 50% are like, you know, he had every right to do that. There's like a Facebook page that's called Byron David Smith as a hero.
What?
That kept coming up when I Googled Byron David Smith. And, you know, everybody has the right to like protect their home. Like, I'm not necessarily arguing that. I'm more arguing that this was like an opportunistic murder, if you really think about it. Like, he was probably going to, like, he had a murderous heart. And then these kids just happened to be the people that he like could easily murder.
Even if you give him the benefit of the doubt that it wasn't premeditated, he still made the choice to murder them. Like Hannah said, he could have shooting somebody in the leg is dangerous because you have a really big artery, but like he could have done like a less fatal wound if he was really scared. But he like literally shot them, and then once they were down, shot them in the head because he wanted them to be dead.
And that's where it falls outside of castle doctrine, right? So castle doctrine is more about self-defense.
Protecting yourself, yes.
And truly, so here's kind of some arguments that were brought up during trial. So the biggest argument in court was that although the initial debilitating shots to both Kifer and Brady could fall under self-defense and therefore the castle doctrine. So like when he first shot them both on the stairs, because the thing is those probably debilitated him. And that there was a huge argument in court. They brought in a bunch of experts like to testify like whether or not those shots would have debilitated both of those like really young, healthy people, right? So these technically fall under self-defense, but the subsequent shots that were definitely intended to kill were too much as the threat was already gone. So like when he decided to shoot one of them in the chin to like execute them, like that no longer fell under self-defense or the castle doctrine.
Yeah.
The county sheriff, Michael Wetzel, acknowledged that this is a quote, "The law doesn't permit you to execute somebody once the threat is gone." So he was like, you know, it definitely would have been justified for him to shoot them and then call 911 because he was older, and even like the county sheriff was like, you know, I could have like seen it being self-defense if he had just shot him like once on the stairs.
And then immediately called the police. Like, that would be a completely different story.
You know, if he really cared about bringing these kids to justice, I think that he would have just set cameras up. If he knew that they were going to come back and burglarize him again, he could have just done that, right?
Yeah, I agree. I also think that for the most part, you don't just like accidentally become a murderer. Like you have the ability and like the desire to murder people.
Not to mention he drug them away from the staircase. Like the more I think about this case, the more I'm like, I just truly don't understand how even like the biggest like gun self-defense proponents,
enthusiast, yeah,
I just don't even understand about how they consider this to fall under that. Like, don't get me wrong, you have every right to like shoot anybody that comes in your house. Like, if somebody comes in and I don't know who they fucking are, yeah, I'm shooting them, you know? Like, you know, but I can't see myself like walking up to their body and shooting them in the head, you know?
Well, and that's exactly what the sheriff,
especially when they're laying on the ground.
Yeah,
like they're laying on the ground, you know?
He execution style murdered them to make a point that no one was gonna steal from me again. Like that's what that is like what I see this.
And it comes down to like a law thing, right? Like, sure, you can be like, oh yeah, I'd kill somebody if they tried to harm me, right? Like if they came into my house and tried to harm me, but the law doesn't protect you against murder, you know? Like if they had accidentally died, like let's say he had shot them both once as they came out on the stairs and he had ran up, called the police, and in that time they had bled out, that would totally, I believe he would have been in the right in that situation.
Yeah, that would have been a different case.
I think it's the events that happened after they were both debilitated. And again, Byron David Smith's defense is going to kind of argue whether or not they were debilitated. So
yeah,
we can assume that two people this young would have likely stayed on the ground once shot and would almost certainly not have gotten up and continued to burglarize or threaten Smith. I've never been shot, obviously, but especially somebody really young who had never been shot, they probably would have been either so shocked or like, you know, in pure shock or scared. They probably would have like just laid there. If these were like trained assassins or whatever, and they had been shot before and they knew how it felt to get shot, it's probably reasonable to believe that they would have they could have gotten up and harmed Byron David Smith because he was old. Like they could have ganged up on him and hurt him severely.
But I was just looking at pictures of these kids and like these are just normal teenagers. Granted, normal teenagers that burglarize people, but
Yeah.
like they're
Who was
not
going down a really bad path in life for sure.
Yeah, like if anything, if he would have fired shots and they were like not hit or something, they would just run out, I would assume.
And here's the thing, Byron David Smith, like, I think it was up to him and he didn't have a defense attorney and a defense team, he probably would have been like, listen, I completely intended on killing them and I feel like I'm justified. There is 6 hours of audio from a small camera in the basement in addition to the security footage, particularly incriminating audio of Smith apparently rehearsing what he would say to the attorney that he knew you would have to hire because he knew he would be in the wrong. So there was like a little clip of him, like, Smith later made several damning statements about how he had no choice but to take the law into his own hands. He at one point said he was no, quote, bleeding heart liberal, and that it in that if the justice system wouldn't stop the burglaries, then he would.
He thought, okay, this is the night. I'm gonna take it into my own hands and I'm gonna kill these people so they don't, like, kind of like trying to prove a point, like, oh, ha ha ha, you guys didn't listen to me, and then I killed these people because like they wouldn't stop burglarizing me.
So Byron David Smith also later admitted he had fired more shots than necessary. Like, he said that. So the trial began on April 21st, 2014. So this is like the following, or about 2 years. They had done like a decent amount of, it was like a year and a half. They'd done a decent amount of like finding expert witnesses, and
wow.
I'm sure there was quite a bit of like trying to decide if they were even going to prosecute this as a criminal case. Like, I'm sure that they kind of had to make that decision. So a coroner testified during the trial about the autopsy she had performed on the bodies on November 24th. So this was so that would have been 2 days after they died. So one particular wound she described was the shot to the right side of Brady's head, where the bullet had first passed through his hand. So it's likely he had kind of like brought his hand up in self-defense, and then the bullet had passed through his hand into his head, or like it kind of grazed the side of his head. This same coroner also testified 2 different guns were used to shoot Haile Kifer. These were a rifle and then a .22 caliber pistol.
Right, because he said his gun got jammed.
Defense attorney Mesh Besher asked the coroner if the first 2 shots to Brady would have made him debilitated enough to not stand, to which she answered not necessarily, although he would have been unable to use his right hand. The coroner was also asked about her knowledge of the drug dextromethorphan and whether or not this drug could have made Kifer hallucinate at the time of the break-in, because the toxicology reported that she had enough in her system to be like quote unquote high. So I'm not familiar with this drug, dextromethorphan. The coroner agreed she was likely high, but maybe not hallucinating. Like, only chronic users of it hallucinate while on it. So
it's cough medicine.
If she was hallucinating, why would that have mattered?
There are certain drugs, especially stimulants, that you can not be immune to pain, but like your pain, like she could have gotten up from the bullets, the shots, like a lot easier than if she was sober.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, obviously that's speculation too. Like, in my opinion, the defense attorney was asking the coroner to speculate, and I know that that's generally not accepted in court.
If she was taking like
cough medicine, yeah,
and she was high, it's like Robitussin. That's like the name for it.
Oh, okay.
Like certain kinds of Robitussin, and which I don't even know anybody that gets high on Robitussin. Is that a thing still? I know it's in like
in rap songs.
Yeah, in lean. People put it in lean.
So Smith was initially charged with 2 counts of second-degree murder, but this was later changed to first-degree murder. This makes a lot of sense if you look at the requirements for first degree, as well as the fact that he lay in wait in the basement for almost 30 minutes.
Yep, lay in wait is that line in first degree murder.
That took it. Well, and like, to be honest, that took it from manslaughter to murder, in my opinion.
Oh yeah. Well, I remember in the the E.O. Green shooting episode, we talked about how lying in wait, it's premeditated. Like, you can't have one without the other.
Yeah.
So
he was found guilty on 2 counts of first-degree murder with premeditation and 2 counts of second-degree murder on April 29th. The jury said that the audio and the video was the main factor in their decision on whether or not to prosecute him on first-degree murder. One of the jurors called him, quote, a deranged individual.
no, really.
He was sentenced to life in prison without parole. So in August 2014, a couple months after the trial, Smith, he actually didn't testify at his murder trial, but Smith argued in court that he should not have to pay the restitution to the family of the victims. So he didn't testify at his own murder trial, but he, in August 2014, went to court specifically to not pay restitution. His argument was that the $42,000 in restitution was overshadowed by the $53,000 in personal property that he had lost due to Nicholas Brady and Haile Kifer's break-ins.
How do they know for a fact that it was them and the other break-ins?
As far as I know, there wasn't any proof of them doing it. I'm pretty sure they were like the sole suspects, but I'm not 100% positive that there was any kind of proof.
How do you even steal 53 grand worth of?
This man had a lot of guns and ammo, and he claimed his insurance only ever reimbursed him for $16,000 of the lost property from the incident that he had reported. As far as I can tell, his motion to not have to pay them restitution was denied. So Smith appealed to the Minnesota Supreme Court and was denied. The court confirmed the decision on the original decision on March 9th, 2016. In November 2018, Smith's lawyers appealed federally to overturn his conviction. They're using the argument that Smith was not awarded a fair, because Smith himself alleges the jury was selected in a way to pick people who were anti-gun in some way. This is his argument, that the trial wasn't fair. And then he was also not awarded an open trial, according to them. This was an argument because the court apparently was briefly closed to the public due to administrative reasons, to which the prosecutors respond that this was in no way a factor and probably would not have affected the guilty verdict. So like under, the law of this country, you have to have a fair and open trial. So like the public has to be able to go in and watch to make sure it's being fair, essentially. Mm-hmm. And then jury selection can make a big difference, but I don't know that it would have made that big of a difference in this particular case, whether or not the jurors were anti-gun or not. I don't think that would have made that much of a difference. Because I think that even a responsible pro-gun owner, I think that somebody who, even if they were super pro-gun and like super pro-home defense, the whole
lie and wait thing.
I don't know that they would have agreed with that either. I think they still would have.
That's a whole different crime than him killing these teenagers.
Looking on Reddit just a minute ago, and like pretty much everyone says that exact same thing. They're like, there's literally no, like, people are on Reddit saying, I believe in like protecting your own house and owning guns if you want to.
Yeah, so do I, totally.
But there's no way. There's no way that is like justified.
I mean, but again, there's a whole Facebook group in support of him. There's a lot of people that think he's some kind of like champion of like the Castle Doctrine. It is obviously, according to the jurors, like direct quote, that the video was super important. He is pretty understood that he would have never gone convicted without the home security footage and then like the creepy things that he was heard saying on the like home camcorder. But yet the deciding factor for the cops to pursue an investigation was that he had dragged their bodies from where they had fallen dead, and he had shot each of them well beyond what would have debilitated them. So that's kind of what took it from like a home invasion to like the cops were like, man, we should probably look deeper into this. Mm-hmm. Additionally, his insistence on the audio that he was in the right and that he was cleaning up a mess and that he was, quote, finally safe, says to me that he intended on killing them and just needed a reason to do it. This man was already a killer and he would have killed someone no matter what. The movie Trespassing from 2016 is directly based on this case. And then the movie Don't Breathe It's the one with the blind guy.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was like loosely inspired by these events. So yeah, that's this week's episode, you guys. Hopefully we didn't get too political on you, but let us know what you think in the comments on YouTube or send us a DM on Instagram. As always, we'll be posting some relevant pictures on our Instagram at Who What Where Podcast. And we will see you next Monday. Thanks for listening, guys.